Hi, I'm Gareth Green and welcome to another of our Inside the Mind of Bach videos, in which we're looking at some Bach chorales to see if we can discover different aspects of Bach's style and what that might have to teach us, so we can learn more about how the Bach style works, learn more about writing harmony as well, which will be a benefit to composers well beyond the people who just want to know how to write a harmonization in the style of Bach and understand more of that Baroque style. So we're having a look at this chorale of Welt, which is number 363 in the Riemann-Schneider collection. You don't particularly need to worry about that. It's just there in case you want to access the rest of the chorale, because we're just going to focus on the first two phrases. This is how it goes. Very interesting pair of phrases from a number of points of view. And first of all, let's just talk about keys, because three sharps, we're in the key of A major, aren't we? The first chord is A major. And when we look at the given melody, now this is what Bach inherited, what he wanted to harmonize. Here's the melody. Now, I think most people would look at that melody and think, fine, the whole of the first phrase is in the key of A major, and it would be perfectly possible to do that, wouldn't it? To finish in A major. It would have sounded absolutely fine. What's clever about what Bach does is that he puts this slightly surprising modulation in the cadence there to the key of F sharp minor. Well, F sharp minor as a key is not over surprising because it's the relative minor of the home key A major, isn't it? But taken that that phrase could so easily be harmonized in A major, that's our expectation. So the ears then suddenly think, oh, we've gone somewhere else. There's an element of surprise at the cadence. All the more so because it's an imperfect cadence really in F sharp minor. We finish on that chord 5 in first inversion, and we don't really kind of get to hear the F sharp minor resolution until the first chord of the next phrase. So that's quite clever, the way he just slips into F sharp minor at the last possible moment, finishes on the dominant chord, and then the next phrase begins with a resolution of that dominant chord onto its tonic. And it's at that point that we suddenly think, ah, yeah, F sharp minor. Okay, and then in the second phrase, here's the melody. Again, it would be perfectly possible to harmonize the whole of that in A major. Actually, what he does is he modulates to E major. That's not quite such a surprise because E major is the dominant key, isn't it? So to finish in E major is good because we get that progression from the original tonic key to the dominant key. However, there are another couple of interesting touches along the way, aren't there? Looking at that cadence in E major at the end, you might just notice what he does just before that, when we get to this point here. Because you think, what's this E sharp doing in the tenor? Well, what's happening here is we've got chord 5 in F sharp minor, and then we go on to chord 1 in F sharp minor. Okay, it's a little bit decorated. We'll come back to that in a moment. But basically, this goes 5-1 in F sharp minor. What's that about? It's a secondary dominant, literally just going 5-1 in another key, and the 1 of that other key belongs to our prevailing key. And that's quite clever as well, because when we get to the 1 in F sharp minor there, well, okay, we've been in A major, haven't we? So 1 in F sharp minor is chord 6 in A major, but it's also chord 2 in E major, which is where we're just going. So it's quite a nice touch of the secondary dominant there to also help transition us from A major to E major. You might also notice there's this slightly cheeky G natural in the bass up here, and you think, what's going on there? Well, if we go from the third beat of that bar, we've got this A major tonic chord. And then you might think, well, if he wants to run thirds in the tenor and bass, he could have done it with a G sharp and kept it in the same key. But by using that G natural, you think, oh, that's interesting, because the G natural is sort of suggesting that we might be going to D major or to B minor. Well, the next chord, when you look at it, is a D major chord, but it's got a seventh in it as well. So it's a D major 7 there, isn't it? So that's quite an interesting little touch that we just have that hint of D major. So you see how he does this kind of double whammy. We have this surprising move to F sharp minor, which he preempts with this kind of nudge into D major to put us off the scent. And then we had this slightly more expected modulation to E major, but just before it, we have a secondary dominant in F sharp minor, and the F sharp minor chord belongs to A major and also belongs to E major. So in both cases, he's using these moves to kind of sort of preempt the modulation that follows, which I think is quite a clever move, actually. Okay, let's just now unpack what's happening in the rest of the harmony. So from the beginning, chord 1, that's all very straightforward, goes on to chord 4. So that's fairly straightforward, isn't it? Now, what happens on the second beat? We get this quite strong dissonance in the bass there, that C sharp, don't we? Well, the C sharp there is an accented passing note. It's passing between the D and the B, but it's on the beat, so it's an accented, which means that if we want to know about this chord, we need to know about these notes, don't we? So if that is the chord, well, what's that chord? It's chord 7 in A major, and it's in first inversion. So it's a 7 in first inversion. So lots of people shy away from using chord 7. If you're going to use it, it often works better in first inversion, and it progresses on to that chord 1 very nicely. So it's a nice progression, isn't it, to go 1, 4, 7B, 1, and the lovely touch is the accented passing note, particularly as an accented passing note in the bass line, really just pushes a bit of dissonance into that corner. That's gorgeous stuff, isn't it? One thing that we perhaps don't often think about so much as well is this question of tessitura. Where are we in the voice? And you'll notice at the beginning the bass line is quite high, isn't it? So because of that, there's a kind of vocal intensity required in singing a bit higher. So having these basses up here with a slightly more intense sound than the other three voices will have is also adding a bit of emphasis to the dissonance of that accented passing note that we don't quite appreciate on the keyboard. It's a lovely touch, isn't it? So sometimes you can unpack the harmony and think that's nice harmony, or there's nothing too unusual about the harmony. It's the way Bach decorates it that gives it that little extra magic, isn't it? Okay, well, this is fine. We arrive on a chord 1 here, and the next beat is also chord 1. So there's nothing too surprising about that. We're going from 1 to 1, but you notice we've got these kind of triple passing notes. The soprano, the alto and the tenor all passing at the same time. So, you know, lots of people are happy to use a passing note or a passing tone if that's how you know it. Double passing notes, maybe we might do that on a special occasion, but triple. And when you get triple, well, what about using one of them in contra-motion with the other two? That's what he's doing. Makes for a nice texture, doesn't it? And then we've talked about this G natural there and where that's going. In terms of that chord, of course, in D major, it's really this chord, isn't it? Which is 7-7, and it's being used in its second inversion. And it's only being used sort of in passing. It's just tucked in after that last beat of the bar, isn't it? Lovely touch at the beginning of the next bar when we come here, because we talked about this as a D major 7 chord. But listen to the part writing there. That's quite amazing stuff, isn't it? We get the dissonance of the second in the upper parts there. Bach has sort of broken a rule, if you like, of harmony, which is that there's more than an octave between the alto and the tenor parts. So in terms of these advisory rules, no more than an octave between any pair of neighbouring parts except the tenor and the bass. Well, here's Bach breaking a rule. He's got that bigger gap between the alto and the tenor. Why has he done it though? To make the most of that dissonance in the alto part. And notice how it's all beautifully prepared. You know, he prepares that dissonance on the note before, then he sounds it, then he resolves it. So, you know, it's the C sharp is harmonic rather than being a suspension, but he's treating it in a sort of suspension way. Prepare, sound, resolve. It's not a suspension, but he's still treating it in that way, and it helps you to get that smoothness of part writing. By preparing that C sharp here, it's all the more poignant when it repeats. Lovely stuff, isn't it? And then we go on to this chord. Well, that's an interesting one. It's a kind of chord 2 in F sharp minor, isn't it? But it's also a 5, well, what is it, in A major? I suppose you have to say it's a 7 really. Could feel like a sort of 5/7, that's why I'm just pausing for thought, but really when you look at the notes it's a 7 really. But it's common to A major and to F sharp minor. And so he's keeping us guessing. Double passing notes, they're rather nice decorations, aren't they? That then pull us on to that surprise move of the dominant chord in first inversion in F sharp minor. So this F sharp minor, he keeps us a surprise to the very last moment at the cadence. That's such a clever move, isn't it? And then as we said, the tonic chord of F sharp minor, so that sort of resolves the previous dominant chord by using the tonic chord. But this is also chord 6 in A major, so he's going back to A major. So when we come on to the next bar, we've got chord 1 in A major here in first inversion. And then we're going to do it again. So 2 chord 1s. Now, if you were to write it like that, it would just sound a little bit stuck, wouldn't it? To repeat chord 1 in first inversion. How does it get round it? Well, he uses a lower auxiliary note in the bass, then he uses a passing note. And that just gets us over that feeling of being stuck. And suddenly we've got this scalic movement in the bass that just welds all that together. And then we've talked about this 5 in F sharp minor, which is great. After the E naturals, that E sharp really brightens the chord, doesn't it? And then we go to 1 in F sharp minor. But again, he just doesn't do that in a straightforward way, because what he does is he says, we'll spruce it up with a suspension. So do you see this? This is the suspended kind of corner. He's preparing there, sounding here, resolving there. So this is a 9/8 suspension. So we've got the dominant chord of F sharp minor, then we have a 9/8. That's a gorgeous moment, isn't it? Ah, can't beat it, can you? And then as he's modulating to E major, he's going to use a 5/7 when he comes to this point, because that A is still sounding. So that's a 5/7. But again, we have an accented passing note in the alto. And then that resolution to the E major chord at the end. So some fascinating things to notice about this chorale as to how he goes about using the keys there, how he uses inessential notes to really squeeze the juice out of the emotion of the chorale, and these little unexpected extra touches on the modulation front. You might notice as well how smooth the part writing is. The chorale is given, so you can't do much about that. But listen to the alto part. It has its own melodic strength. Lots of stepwise movement and repetition. So we're not leaping all over the landscape. Here's the biggest leap. Then he comes back within the leap. And some repetition and some scale work as well. It's a melody in its own right, isn't it? Or listen to the tenor part. Going by step and repeating, step down the scale, back up the scale. Small leap and a repetition. Here's the biggest leap. And then a bit of coloration before finishing off. So it has its own melodic identity. Listen to the bass line. Nice strong leap, then down the scale, then back up again for a moment before going on down. Bit of a leap down, then scale work, and then a more pronounced cadence at the end. So the leaps come at the cadence point just to make that a little bit more pronounced. So it's lovely to see how he writes melodic lines in all four parts as well, and just how parts combine with suspensions, accented passing notes to really kind of squeeze a bit of something extra out of it. So what do we end up with? We end up with this. And another pair of absolutely beautiful phrases of a Bach chorale. Well, if you've enjoyed that, if you go to our website, www.mmcourses.co.uk, you can find our Bach Chorale course. That's got lots more detail on how to go about the task of harmonizing a chorale in the style of Bach. So you might find that very useful if you're needing to fulfill that task for an exam requirement, for example, or simply because you're interested in understanding the Baroque style a bit more, understanding the Bach harmonization techniques a bit more, or wanting to get good at writing harmony so you can write in some other style. Many other courses out there as well, like the theory courses, the aural courses, the aural dictation courses, the analysis courses, the orchestration courses, a wealth of material for you. So have a look round and see what you think might be useful to you from there. While you're on the home page, you might like to click on Maestros. There's a link to Maestros, and that's our international musical community. It's great to be a member of Maestros because there are all sorts of perks, including discounts on the online courses, and mainly because you've got this fantastic monthly opportunity to join us for live streams. And one of those live streams, I tend to inject a fair solid chunk of teaching. So there's a topic and we try to learn as much as we can in about an hour, and people can ask questions or give feedback, but we try to motor through a fair bit of input there. And then in the second live stream, that's a chance for you to submit recordings of your own performances or your own harmony exercises. Could be a Bach chorale working, for example, your own compositions, arrangements, whatever you want to do. Ask all your questions and we'll share that with the group, but I'll give you personal feedback on the work. And it's a very supportive group of people there, all sorts of different abilities musically, but people just love to be there and to share with other like-minded musicians. So if that's of interest to you, have a search around the website, see what you can find.